So again, as we're, when the Paul George rumor comes out last night, you talk to a lot of different people, just looking for the motivation. Like, why does this come out now? What else is out there? We've talked about the OG Anunoby component on the show this week. I want to go over the particulars of, I guess, how he got to New York and now what's happening. So prior to the deadline, the Knicks trade quickly Barrett draft picks for Anunoby. The New York Knicks are run by the father of OG Anunoby's agent. Very important. And then on top of that, OG Anunoby played through a pretty bad injury at the end of the series, New York and Indiana.
Which was ridiculous.
And very clearly could not give it a proper go. Everyone was like, wow, what a warrior, blah, blah, blah. Give him credit for going out there. But the other takeaway amongst people around the league was, oh, he's definitely coming back. A guy doesn't go out like that and risk injury if he thinks that the money and the place that he's going to play is on the line. Now, I will say, I do still think, just like I've said with Paul George, I think the most likely outcome is that OG Anunoby stays in New York, father and son work out a good contract for the player here. Mm-hmm. And we see what happens with him and Brunson and the rest of these guys moving forward. But I do think they have now left the door open because of the money that has been proposed up to this point. I think the Knicks, to some degree, are trying to keep some flexibility for multiple reasons. One, and this is the more immediate problem, they are trying to figure out what the market is and what the cost is going to be for Isaiah Hartenstein this summer, because he was a very important piece, not just in the playoffs, but throughout the regular season. Mitchell Robinson is a guy who certainly talented, certainly an impactful guy when he's able to play, but has been dealing with injury issues for a little while now. So what they're going to do with Hartenstein will impact the amount of money they're either able or willing to go up to for Anunoby. And then the other part that this is always kind of the looming thing in New York is that they're still hyper aware of, hey, if a big name, by the same logic that the Sixers would try to keep all their avenues open, the Knicks are going to do the same. And the Knicks have known for quite a long time that Donovan Mitchell has had interest in playing in New York. Now, I will say on the Mitchell front specifically, there have been more rumors over the last month or two that I've heard, certainly that have been reported elsewhere, that he could end up extending in Cleveland. I'm not saying that's a done deal. But whether it's Mitchell, whether it's some other star, Karl Anthony Towns, a name that has come up a lot. He's a CAA guy. CAA guys tend to end up on the New York Knicks, even more so than Nova guys. The Knicks don't want to box themselves in for when the next opportunity comes up. They really like Anunoby. I think they're willing to pay him a pretty good chunk of money. I think Ian Begley has said maybe like 30, 35 million a year, I believe. And I trust Begley on most of the Knicks stuff.
And if he's saying that 3 weeks ago, you expect that they would probably go 35 plus.
I think push comes to shove. Yeah. They'll probably up it by a little bit. And I think where it probably ends is Anunoby in let's say a 37, 38. Instead of, it'd be let's say hypothetically the Sixers would offer 40. The Knicks started at 35. I think he'd take the middle ground in New York. Right. I think that would make sense to me. But the Knicks are trying to split the baby a little bit, keep those avenues open down the road, maintain this relationship and retain OG Anunoby, but at a number that allows them some flexibility moving forward. Whether that works out for them, that's not entirely clear to me. So we're going to find out. But from everyone I've talked to, while he might not be truly he could be anywhere, I think he is at least in play in the next week and a half, 2 weeks.
Well, but if the Sixers are intent on making a move at the draft, then they can't wait that long, Kyle. That's the only reason they're cool on Paul George. Only reason.
Yeah, so, look, the OG, when we talked about it before, and again, I'll just repeat what we said at the time when people would start to bring up OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam as being two names that we don't discuss. Well, one of it was because, as Kyle said, when the guy's out there and he's limping, coming back into a game with a really bad hamstring injury, and he can't get up and down the floor. Oh, this guy's staying. And they traded the assets that they did, the 2 players and the pick, to acquire the player. He's not going anywhere. So this is a big surprise, a big development to just keep an eye on. And with the information out there, if he is truly available and is somebody that they can maybe convince to leave New York, that would be a pretty good get if they are able to pivot from the Paul George thing. And I know you even talked about it, Derek, that if we started to rank the names, if he was available, he would be at the top of your list.
If he was available at 35, like he would be, because of the extra flexibility you get between that and the 49 for Paul George or Jimmy. The problem is, if let's say 35 really is the upper limit of what the Knicks can offer, because they have his bird rights, a starting point of 35 from them is going to be more than a starting point of 35 for the Sixers, both in terms of years and dollars, because they would get 8% raises over 5%. It wouldn't be drastic with the raises, but the extra year would be significant. So the Sixers, to beat that, even if New York's top line offer is 35, to beat that, you probably have to start at like 40. Yeah. And then it becomes a little bit tougher. But I like OG a lot. The injury concerns are there for sure, but he would completely transform your defense. He would be a really good standstill catch and shoot floor spacer. He would be good. He'd be underwhelming for a lot of people because he's not really going to create his own shot a ton. I get that. He's not perfect. None of the options available are. But because of his youth, because of his defensive impact, and because of his shooting, he would certainly, he wouldn't be a disaster scenario, I don't think, at all.
So if that was the
not
case,
even close.
No, not even close. But if that was the case offensively, as you said, there will be a lot of people who are disappointed because the offense may not look as pretty as others. What are you looking at with the other potential things that you have to do then?
Who knows who's going to be available? But you would have significantly. If he's at, let's say he's at 40, you would have 24 to spend. You'd have $24 million to spend and 5 first-round draft picks to trade. You would have some flexibility to go out there, and I think that would probably come from a trade, which is why it makes it tough to talk about rather than a free agent signing. But you would definitely have, even if it's maybe not day one, you would definitely have a chance to. That's where you might go out there and be like, all right, well, we got OG, we got him locked down. Give me a balloon payment guy or 2 so that next year at the deadline, we can flip some of these picks for a player who becomes available. That's a little easier stomach when maybe you didn't get the full haul that you wanted this summer, but you at least got OG in a big contributor role.
But you mentioned that the other key is they would not have to give up draft picks for him. They can maybe do something elsewhere with those draft picks that they don't trade for him or Paul George or whoever it might be.
That's one scenario, because we talk a lot about trading the pick, even though we just spent the entire week talking about the draft. We talk a lot about trading it, in part because that will get you above the, with that second salary slot, that would get you above the mid-level exception. Well, if you get OG at 40 rather than spending the full 49, you can keep that pick and still have a $15+ million offer in free agency. Because of that, maybe increase your chances of keeping this pick and rostering a player and trying to develop someone.
We all silly like the mayor.